Thank you so much, Lawson, for talking to me. I wish I could ask you, Lawson, who you think it will be, but I think I won't be that unfair on you. But I will ask you this, though. This is a poisoned chalice by any standards. I mean, a job where you simply do not complete your term of office, which is 10 years. How difficult a task is it?
Well, it's a significant task, as you rightly say, Tulisi's way. In the 20 years of the NPA, we've had several heads of that organisation. None of them have served a full 10-year term. And we're certainly hoping now that through this new appointment process and a renewed commitment to supporting the independence of the NPA, to deal with issues of high crime levels in our country, to deal with issues of state capture and corruption, we will have someone at the helm of this institution that will not be afraid to execute their constitutional mandate to prosecute without fear, favour or prejudice. But the panel that President Ramaphosa has assembled have a tall order ahead of them in choosing a person that fits that bill.
Yeah, and in terms of that panel, Lawson, the Constitution bestows the power to appoint an NDPP on the President. So already it's unprecedented that the President would then say, I want sort of an advisory panel that is broad-based so that I get as many inputs as possible. Previous presidents did not really do that. To what extent is this likely to help President Ramaphosa and stand him in good stead in terms of appointing a proper person?
Well, I think it's a welcome initiative that the President has taken to appoint a panel to advise him on the selection of a national director. We, as part of civil society, have long lobbied for a more consultative and open and transparent process. Unfortunately, this process isn't as open and transparent as we would like it to be, with interviews being conducted in public as they are for judges and heads of Chapter 9 institutions. But the appointment of a panel of relevant stakeholders is to be welcomed, and we certainly hope that through this process that will hopefully be far more in terms of a questioning of candidates and really understanding that the candidate that emerges from this process is someone that has the confidence of a range of stakeholders and not just the President himself. So, we certainly hope that this is going to be a more robust process that results in a better result.
So if you were in that panel, Lawson Naidu, where would you start looking? Would it be within the bar in South Africa broadly, or would you narrow it down to, certain figures and characteristics, of people that serve on the various bar councils of South Africa? But also, would you be inclined to look inside the NPA? Does experience count for anything when it comes to this?
Well, I think there are a range of attributes that one needs to look for, and it really is a difficult job description, I think, to fulfill, because obviously it needs to be someone who has some experience and understanding of the criminal justice system in South Africa, understanding of criminal trial process, but also someone who has leadership qualities, who's robustly independent. And I think a factor that's often neglected in looking at this position is someone that really has very broad management and organizational experience, someone that is able to pull together a very large and key institution. And I think sometimes much too much emphasis is placed on the prosecutorial experience of the person, because at the national level, the NPA takes very few decisions with regards to actual prosecutions. Those are decisions that are really taken by the directors of public prosecutions in the 9 provinces. So this is really somebody that we need at the helm of the institution, who's able to command respect, whose independence is beyond reproach, and who has the organizational ability to pull together and renew this institution, as we have seen, which is racked by infighting, division and factionalism.
Should a potential NDPP, also in addition to everything that you have said, be someone who has an understanding of our politics and the political dynamics? I'll tell you why I ask. You can go back all the way to Bulelani Nguka and you look at Vusi Pikoli. the one common thread that runs through the long list of many of the NDPPs we have lost over the years is that in many instances they floundered at the point at which they had to take a decision on what was quote-unquote politically sensitive cases.
Indeed, I couldn't agree more. I mean, an understanding of the political environment and an ability to navigate that political environment is crucial to this office, particularly in the period immediately coming up, where there are going to have to be some tough decisions taken with regards to prosecution of high-profile individuals, high-profile politicians regarding issues of corruption and state capture. And this person is going to be able to have to understand that dynamic and really see clearly through it in order to take the right decisions, but taking it with a sense of responsibility, with a sense of sharing of information and taking the public into their confidence as to why certain things are done. And I think that's an attribute that is sometimes underestimated for a national director, but something that's going to be critically important going forward. And I think, you know, being able to instill public confidence in that office is something that is going to be sorely tested, and an understanding of the national political scenario is critical in terms of discharging that responsibility.
Geez, Lawson, this sounds to me like a really difficult job, because in addition to all of these as well, you can also add the judgment on the moral standing of this particular person. Example, Mxolisi Nxasana, in as much as former President Jacob Zuma was found to have really induced him with that 17 million rand payout, basically bought him out of office, it then said something about Mxolisi Nxasana himself to say he was someone that, you know, had his price, that could be bought for a particular price to vacate office. That's not someone you want in the NDPP, and this Nxasana example is just one example of the many, perhaps, moral landmines that an NDPP could find themselves facing.
Indeed, and I think in addition to the judgment of the Constitutional Court in that Nkasana case that you just referred to Lesizwe, I think members of the panel would be well advised to also study the report of the Jinwala inquiry that looked into the fitness of Vusi Pikoli to hold office some 10 years ago now, as well as the report of the internal investigation that was conducted by former Constitutional Court Judge Justice Zak Yaqub, which was initiated by Mr. Nkasana himself, and which really looked at the factions and divisions within the NPA and called for wide-ranging investigations and reforms of the NPA. So I think the problems within this institution have been fairly well documented, and one certainly hopes that the members of the panel have familiarized themselves with it, and will be asking prospective candidates key questions that emanate from those various reports and judgments.
All right, thank you so much for this discussion. That is KSAC's Lawson Naidu joining us from Cape Town.